Are you feeling better?
Yeah. About a week ago, I had this really bad cough. And it started to get a little better around Christmas Day. The next day, not good. Hello and welcome to the Resilient Lineage podcast, where we reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Milo, and I am working on not getting what you have.
What I have.
You ended up tanking pretty hard.
Yeah.
So in our household, obviously December 25th is Christmas Day. The next day is December 26th, which is your brother's birthday.
And I was supposed to go into work super early, and they put me outside.
Yeah, and that didn't go well for you.
Yeah.
A cold turned into pneumonia. So Olivia, fortunately, we were going to record this podcast a few days ago, but because you were sick.
My voice, every other breath ended with a cough. So I wanted to spare you guys. And Dad's like, let's not push this.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Let's cough some more into the microphone.
I got tea, a cough drop.
We're all medicated up. So we ended up in urgent care on
the 28th.
On Saturday, and so here we are. Our last podcast, our last episode of the year.
Not crazy.
Of 2024. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through just kind of reflecting on the past year. So the way we're going to do this is actually consistent with a process that I taught along with some other folks. That I was a part of a Navy training team. And we taught what was called the warrior mindset. And the warrior mindset focuses on achieving a very specific and intended outcome. And what we taught was like, how do you get there? How do you get there, whether it's related to your, physically, mentally, or spiritually? What are the things that you have to do in order to be able to get to that place? And so what we did was we taught this every week at the training command I was at, but then we also took it on the road into different places. And personally, because I've been teaching this stuff for about a year and a half, 2 years now, one of the things that I have found is like I've kind of rolled this into my thinking and my way of doing things. We've actually been kind of rolled it into the way we've been doing this podcast. And so what we thought we'd do is, so this podcast is going to be divided up into kind of two sections. The first section, we're going to walk you through what that process is on how to achieve those objectives that we have. And then we're going to kind of talk about the objectives that we had when we started this podcast and kind of do our own thing. Or as they say at Google, we're going to eat our own dog food. Have you ever heard of that phrase?
No.
It's called dog fooding. So when Google would make a piece of software, do you know this?
No.
when Google would make...
How do we get there?
Well, I don't know, it's dog fooding.
Okay.
We're doing basically it's you practice what you preach. It's this idea of, if you're going to make something, use it yourself before you make it available to others. And this is actually how Gmail got started, is Google created Gmail as their mail client internally, and then they tested it internally before they practiced it externally. And so we've been doing this. You and I have been doing this process internally before we talk about it externally.
So we've been dog fooding this jank, this setup.
Yeah. Okay, so the process is this. So I want you to imagine a bullseye, okay? So you got a bullseye, and then you have a north, south, east, west, okay? So the north side of it, imagine there's a bullseye and then, kind of a compass. So the north is what is your commitment, or what are you committed to? The east portion is how you prepare. The southern portion is execute, and the western portion is reflect. So if I were to draw, and this is all in the show notes for those of you who are listening. So if you were to, you'll see the diagram there. But, if we were sitting here and I was to draw this on a napkin, right? Imagine I draw a bullseye, and then on the top is commit, right? What are you committing yourself to? And this is the idea where, well, do you want to read the notes there?
Yeah, like willing to prioritize or sacrifice for an outcome that is desirable.
So this is more than like wishful thinking, like, or I want tos. Because people do that all the time.
I this.
Yeah, I want to write a book.
I want to start a podcast.
I want
and
to start
you're
a
like,
podcast.
okay, let's come into this. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, okay. That's a big thing. So the question becomes, if you're going to commit to this, what are you willing to prioritize? And anytime you make a list of priorities, something is going to end up on the bottom. And are you okay with those things being on the bottom? There's going to be some time of sacrifice, and it's for an outcome that you desire, and in some ways, it's for an outcome you don't currently have or that you want to improve. Right? Excuse me.
Whoa.
Oh, I'm drinking tea. I'm trying to stay well.
Okay.
So what that requires is some measure of decisiveness, right? You got to make the decision. Okay, this is the course this is what I'm going to target, right? I'm going to commit to that target. Okay, so if at the top on the north side, I put commit, then over on the east side,
You're prepare.
Yeah, I'm prepare. So the commitment leads into preparation.
Which is like willing to do the hard thing now. Because you don't know how it's going to be. I mean, we didn't know how this podcast would be. I mean, it could have flopped.
Well, maybe it has.
Maybe it has. And we're just, hoping this episode will help.
We're going to grade ourselves on the second half of this episode.
Yeah, and, it's hard to do. And you have an anticipation that this will pay off in the future. But it requires a delay of gratification.
So that's the hardest piece, right? So you can say you're going to commit to something. Okay, great. How are you going to prepare for this? And people that say, well, I'm just going to wing it, it's because it's that what they want is the results more than they are without the work. And so anytime, whether it's, in our lives, whether it's for you or me, like let's say there's a paper or a test or there's a project or there's a task around the house or whatever it is, if it's it's not a big deal, I'll wing it. It's really coming from a place of I'm not willing to make that the priority in my life. Maybe it should have in order for me to get the desired outcome. And so the preparation piece really is that, okay, are you willing to delay gratification? Because there's been, and we'll talk about this when we get to the podcast, but there's been times when, have you felt like doing an episode every week?
I feel like you know this. No. I'm like, I thought we just did one. And it was like the week before. And you're like, oh, yeah, it's a weekly thing.
Yeah. Or those times when we had to do 3, because I was going to be out of town or you were going to be gone or...
Fall break.
We had to stack them up in order to hit that weekly rhythm. Yeah. So, but the idea is, okay, we're gonna kind of prepare ourselves, right? We're gonna do the show notes. We're gonna do some research and some study, all that kind of thing. Why? Because it's enjoyable right now? No, but because we're gonna delay that gratification.
Yeah, and because of that, this can be our 48th episode for the year.
Yeah. Then that not the last, but then the kind of the southern portion of this bullseye is that execution piece.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like consistently do the work regardless of whatever obstacles that come with that. I mean, for us, that's different with creating the show notes and airing it and setting up all of our equipment and setting out the time. Like there's preparing and then you have to actually sit down and do it.
Yeah. Well, and it's the show notes, it's the updating the website, it's making sure the RSS feed is, it's all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just requires that you finish what was started.
Yeah. Which that's going to be our first episode of the new year. Finishing things. Yeah. So when next week, when our first episode is going to be on, because we're in a season where people will think about New Year's resolutions and starting a bunch of new things. And I think there's a healthy place to kind of step back and go, what do I need to finish? Before I start anything new, before I venture down new roads, what are the things that have to get done first? Mm-hmm. Okay, we're gonna be going over that next week. Okay, and then the last. So this would be the western portion of the bullseye, right? And this is a cycle. So obviously your commitment leads to your preparation, which leads to your execution. That then leads to the reflection piece.
Yeah. And just taking the time to see if your commitment and execution are in alignment. And if they aren't, I mean, we'll change things so we know how to prepare for next year. But it requires openness and admit growth and maybe expose a little bit, but and just investigate failure.
So this is the piece where oftentimes people, like a really healthy reflection is when you look at what did we commit to do and how does that align with how we executed? And if that's off, what do you need to change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm asking you a question.
Oh. I just thought that was like one of those statements. I was like, yeah. Like with this whole thing?
Yeah. So if you committed to do this, right? And then you execute and those are a little bit off, what do you need to change?
I mean, whatever is off.
No.
You need to go back.
Preparation.
Yeah. That's what I meant.
Because what's difficult is oftentimes people they'll turn reflection into everybody did awesome. You're great and you're fantastic and thank you for the help and appreciate the feedback and like it turns into this thing which is fine, but what did you set out to do? Mm-hmm. And is that seen? Is that what people are experiencing with the act of service or the product or the work or whatever it is that you're doing? Is that seen in the execution piece? And I think oftentimes people want to blow over that because they really don't want to investigate what they need to shift. So this is a cycle. And it's a cycle that's ongoing because you commit, you prepare, you execute, you commit, and then or reflect, and then that leads you back to the commitment piece, right? So now I'm back to a deeper understanding of what that commitment is. So if we go to podcast next year, do you have a better understanding what the commitment is?
Yeah.
So now next year's going to introduce a whole new set of obstacles because right now I'm penciled in to not be 25 minutes down the road from you while you're in college. Like
so
I'm
that's
going to
look different.
Several states away. So there's a whole new set of obstacles that are going to come our way in order for us to continue to do this podcast. So now that we have a handle on, okay, what does it take to do the podcast? What are we trying to accomplish? We can take that commitment level up a notch. Now, here's the thing. The beauty of it is this is material that we teach in the Navy. But the beauty of this is if you look at the way Jesus led his disciples, this is precisely what he did with them. So he calls, in fact, in Luke chapter, in the Gospel of Luke, if you look at that account, there's a part where Luke calls the disciples to be, fishers of men. And then it's something like, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it's something like 140 verses go by and the disciples are not mentioned once. So he calls them and then they're not mentioned. So the idea is this whole time they're walking with him, they're watching him preach, they're watching him do miracles, they're watching him do, heal the sick, cast out demons, all of these things. Then he looks at them and says, okay, I'm going to send you out 2 by 2, and I want you to proclaim the gospel, heal in my name, and cast out demons. And so where are we at? Well, we're in that execution phase, right? So he asks them for this commitment. Will you follow me and be fishers of men? Then there's these 140 odd verses where they're not mentioned, but it's this preparatory phase. Then he sends them out, and then they come back. And there's this, it says Jesus withdrew to a quiet place. And it was this idea of there's this reflection that takes place during that time. In fact, there was one time when they came back and Jesus says, how did it go? And they go like, well, we, proclaimed the gospel, we healed in your name, cast out demons, except there was this one type of demon we couldn't cast out. Jesus is like, well, that kind only comes out by prayer and fasting, right? So there's this, we ran into some obstacles. We couldn't execute on everything we attempted to execute. Well, let me give you some more information that will help you the next time you go out. Does that make sense? What's fascinating in the Luke passage is that when they do this, is they go from commit to prepare to execute. They go do these things. They come back and they're debriefing, right? They're reflecting on this. And then it says the crowds find them, and Jesus begins to preach. It's time for, you okay?
Yeah.
And then it's time for the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Time to send them home. And the disciples say, hey, but they should really go home so that people can go grab dinner. Jesus says, what does he say? You feed them. Well, now he's taken their commitment up to a whole new level, right? And so it's this cycle then of what are you committed to? Okay, I'm going to prepare you on that. Okay, now it's time to go do it. All right, now what did you learn on that? Okay, got it? Now what's the new level of commitment, right? So it's this cycle that moves through. So what I like about this is that it's this process that isn't, the Navy talks about it in this terms of like, obviously we want to be a good, strong defensive force for our country, but there's a spiritual element to all of this as well. Like, how am I doing? What are my commitments? And if you were to look at the course of the last year, what did I commit myself to? Well, look at what you executed. And look at the things that you did. And is that adding up to the type of life that you want? Thoughts?
No, yeah, like I completely agree. I mean, yeah. Like that, I feel like it's also mentioned in Matthew 10 because I was reading that the other day.
Yeah, it's mentioned in all the synoptic gospels. But I think in that Luke text, it's interesting that from when he calls them to when they're mentioned again, there's this really quiet period where they're not talked about. And I think that speaks to oftentimes in the preparation phase, there's a lot of things that are happening in silence. There's a lot of stuff that people aren't paying attention to. Okay, so
let's dive in.
Having said all that, like we said, our show notes are available for this. If you want to kind of like, what are they? I wish I could see this. We have that for you to be able to download. And so in the podcast, in the notes, like if you pull up the description, you'll see a link that'll take you to the show notes. You click on that, and then it'll take you to the website where all of this is hosted, and you can visit that there. Okay, so there were 5 objectives that we laid out for ourselves.
Did we mention it in the first episode?
We did.
In the introduction.
Yeah, in the introduction. And we've come a really long way since then.
I have.
Well, I think we both have.
No, yeah.
But I mean, I've done this kind of thing a little bit before.
Yeah.
So I had a handle
I was
on
nervous.
what was going to take.
I said yeah a lot.
This was new to you.
This was new to me. I didn't know. Dad was like, you know what, we're going to do this. And I didn't think we were going to get like a ton of equipment.
Okay, hold on. Let's back up. I didn't say we were going to do this. Whose idea was this?
This was mine.
This was your idea.
No, yeah. I actually remember this when it came to me. Boom, light bulb. Had oatmeal in 2022. Yes.
So you've been sitting on this for a little while. Okay.
And usually Dad's one. I have tons of ideas. I'm like an idea generator.
Yes.
I come to you. I have thoughts ready to just explain. Dad's one to just not, he'll get like 5 words and he'll determine the worth of this idea. And he'll shoot it down if it's like, this ain't worth my time. So.
I think that sounds so horrible.
But most of them, are they worth anyone's time? Usually it explodes my mind.
Well, I would say like you're good at ideas, but in some ways ideas are the easy part, right? Mm-hmm. So the difference is that it's coming up, again, it's about priorities. Good idea. How does that fit into the list of priorities?
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'll walk through these, what these 5 things were, what our objectives were, the bullseye that we created for ourselves, the outcomes we wanted to see. And then I want you to walk through like how you thought we did in each one of these. Okay. So how well did we execute on these things? So first, we wanted to model and inspire what a father-daughter or intergenerational conversation could look like. We wanted to build something that we could take pride in. We wanted to be scripturally grounded and culturally aware. We wanted to cultivate a hunger for God's word and learn how to hear his spirit. And then we wanted to have fun. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's back up to these. So the first one, model and inspire father-daughter or intergenerational conversation. How do you think we did with that?
Do you want me to give a grade first and then an explanation?
No, we'll do the grade. I want to see if your grade and my grade match.
Okay. I'm gonna Excuse me. I mean, again, for me, I'm the daughter. At least for my relationship with you, it's gotten healthier. Not that it wasn't healthy, but just sitting down and talking to my dad, like, it's been fun.
Good.
So, also, like...
Okay, but the question was, did we model and inspire what a father-daughter and intergenerational...
I'd say based on the people that we've met, or the people that want to know what our podcast is about, that they are inspired by us.
Okay.
To have, especially parents, to have conversations with their kids.
Okay. I've heard that as well.
Mm-hmm.
We've gotten some notes from folks that have said, I listened to your podcast on the drive to school, and it's generated some good conversations.
Because it's not like one of those things where it's like, it's like I don't go around saying, hey, parents, you want to learn how to be an awesome parent? You want to learn how to have those healthy conversations with your kids? Listen to this. It's like, sure, that's one of our goals, but that's what we want the fruit of this to be.
That's the outcome we want.
Yeah. That's not necessarily like the drive. Like, we want to be noted for this. Like, we want to just say the truth.
Right. But I think we want to do it in a way that, because I think sometimes...
That comes naturally.
Well, it comes naturally, but one of the things I see happen with folks is that parents, particularly, sometimes they don't know how to have these kind of conversations with their kids, and without it becoming combative or preachy or things like that, or or the opposite of like just like, oh, whatever you think, yeah, your truth is, live your truth type stuff. So I think we've done that. We've tried to target that, and the feedback we've gotten has told us we've done that. I think the danger, though, is people aren't going to necessarily give us negative feedback on that. And I think that's going to be true with all these, is we don't know the people that found this podcast or maybe listened to it, and then we're like, yeah, that's not very good. Now, we first released the first 3 episodes to a closed group of friends, and they all listened to it and gave us really helpful feedback. Remember that?
Yes.
And so that was valuable because there was a lot of tweaking we did on the other side of that. Okay, so what grade would you give ourselves in that area?
Say a solid 8.
An 8? 8 out of 10? So that's a B.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd give ourselves a B, like an 83%.
Okay.
Like a low B. And the reason for that, I think if it was... And we're going to talk offline how we can improve that area. But I think if there's ways we can kind of pump that up a bit, because I've heard a lot of people say they like the podcast. I don't hear a lot of people saying they share the podcast. And the things that inspire us are the things that we share with others. So maybe that's too much of a critique, but I think it's healthy to kind of assume that, okay, there's growth. There's some growth there that we can take on. Okay, so the second one was that we wanted to build something that we take pride in.
Yeah.
So that's us, right? That's kind of divorced of, even if other people don't like it, even if other people don't listen to the podcast, is this something that we can take pride in?
So I'll say it first. I was just like, I don't know. This is like a hobby. It is. It's something I do with my dad. So, but it's like outside of podcasting, I don't necessarily think about it. So it's funny when I'll like just be at work or at school and they'll be like, hey, like I listened to your podcast. Like, it's like, I completely forgot I do that. Like, it's not, oh, wait, I need to go share now. But it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, I just forgot I forgot I didn't do this for a minute. But like, whoa. But, no, yeah, like it boosts my energy. I'm like, this is great.
But the feedback is encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so what grade would you give yourself in that area?
I take great pride in this. For me personally, I'd say like a 8.5.
Okay, so an 85%. Solid B. I would put it at like for me, I think we've done something that I'm like at an 88%, like an upper B, not quite a B plus, because I see room for growth. But at minimum, if we were to stop the podcast right now, I think we could look back over the last year and kind of go like, that was fun. I think we can look back and
we did a whole year.
There's a whole year. There's things that, in the future when we forgot what we covered, we could go back and listen to and be like, wow, I forgot we covered those topics, or do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's sort of like opening up a box you forgot that you had. Like, that's in some ways. I remember when I was in high school, I did some writing and I did some art and stuff. And then it went in a tub and it went in a closet and I didn't see it again for like 3 or 4 years. And, the growth you experience from when you're a junior in high school to a junior in college is pretty significant. The amount of life change that takes place. And it was somewhere in that period of time, I was going through this box and I found these old writings and I found these old drawings. And there was some of it that I was like, oh, I can't believe I did that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could tell my heart wasn't in it. And then there was other things that I came across that I was like, I'm really proud of this work. And it had nothing to do with the letter grade or how well I did in that class. I could tell I had put my heart into something that I was really, really proud of. And I was still proud of it 4 years later. And I think there's a lot of this that we'll look back on and go like, man, I think the whole of it we'll take pride in. But I think there's things we could do to expand that, right? To grow in that area. Okay, number 3, to be scripturally grounded and culturally aware.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, like, I don't feel like when we talk, I think we implement both of these well in each episode. Like, it doesn't sound like we're under a rock and we're super traditional, super conservative, like, relationship between a father and daughter. But we're also, like, not, like, on the other side, and we don't talk about scripture like we do. Like, we can both be scripturally and culturally aware without, like, necessarily tapping into today's concerns or bringing up what's going on in the world around us. Which, I mean, we could talk about that, but at the end of the day, I mean, other people are talking about that. And
what would be an example of that?
Well, like, bringing up how to have healthy conversations when your school does X, Y, and Z in a Christian way. Or just talk about political stuff or tap into that.
Yeah.
Which, it's like, we can talk about that, but at the end of the day, it's like, is God being preached? Are we saying the truth? Are we being an inspiration?
Yeah, I think are
we stewarding our resources the way God needs us to steward them?
Yeah, I think there's there can be a tension between, we want to be scripturally grounded. So, Scripture's timeless. The truths of Scripture are timeless. Whether you're male or female, the truths are the truths. Whether you're a kid or a parent or single or married or living in the 21st century or living in the 17th century, right? That there are these truths and principles that God wants us to live by, regardless of the, how much money we make or how much education we have or what our race or gender is, and any of those things that oftentimes people will put on as limiting factors. Okay, so that's the scripturally grounded piece. The culturally aware piece is the piece that is dynamic, right? That what is culturally aware now will not be the same thing 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, we just came through political season. We could have talked a lot about that stuff. How do we vote? Which we did offline. We talked a lot about that privately as a family. But to do that publicly, you all of a sudden start, you're kind of hitching your dialogue to things that are temporary in nature, that shift very, very quickly. And so I think there's this tension between how do you live in that middle space, that I'm going to hang on to the timeless truths of Scripture while at the same time be mindful of the
world we live in.
The sort of currents of the times that we are in.
Yeah.
So what grade would you give us in that area?
Say 9.
A 9? I'd give myself. So you're giving us a 9, or are you giving yourself a 9? I'd give myself a 7.5.
Oh,
maybe an 8, an 80%. And because I feel like, it's interesting when I was on one of my last commands, I was around a lot of young adults, and I felt like I was more culturally aware of a lot of stuff because I was in constant dialogue with your demographic, right? And a demographic from a wide variety of perspectives. And the last 2 commands I'm at, I don't have that same access to that demographic. Like, I have more distance. And so I don't feel like I have my thumb on the pulse of things as much as I used to. And I don't know how to recapture that other than read a bunch of stuff and listen. There's podcasts I listen to and stories I pay attention to and some different things. But anyway, I feel like that's kind of faded a bit. My cultural awareness meter. So I think, and I don't have a great solve for that. So if you have ideas,
work at Chick-fil-A.
go get a side job at Chick-fil-A. All right. Note to self. Okay. Cultivate a hunger for God's word and learn to hear his spirit. That's the 4th outcome we want. To cultivate a hunger for God's word and learn to hear his spirit.
I feel like that's my forgotten one. I forgot this was a goal. I mean, it's a great goal that we want our listeners to hear it and then be like, actually, I should go spend time with God now. Or how should I have rehashed that situation? Or how do I need to go about this new decision? And also just cultivating a hunger for him and then learning from that. I mean, even after myself, I feel like after we, personally, since this was a forgotten goal, I feel like I'd give myself a 6.
As far as your ability to
not, yeah. It's not I probably should approach this more so of how, I mean, I feel like I say this in prayer, how can we use this time to just speak the truth and then be an inspiration to those who are listening, but not so much of each person that's listening that may they have an encounter that they haven't had today or they need in this moment that will spark something in them that, let me pray real quick, or before I go into work, let me do this, and spend at least an intentional moment thinking about who God is.
Yeah.
Because I feel like for me personally, as soon as we end the recording, I'm like, great episode, Dad. And I walk out of the room. It's not you know what? Let me go ponder this thought. Let me go research this. Let me go spend some time with God real quick. That's not my immediate.
That's not part of your process.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's which if you think about the warrior mindset, so you got commit, prepare, execute, reflect. What I'm hearing you say is you kind of do we're committed to do an episode, 42 on whatever topic. We prepare the show notes, iron that out, execute, record the podcast. What I'm hearing you say is there isn't that reflection piece. Mm-hmm. You just kind of okay, what are we doing next?
Yep.
Are we good? Can I go back to whatever?
I feel like you know this.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, the reflection piece is the hardest one for people to do. Oftentimes, and it's because it's the one thing that doesn't afford. It's the one thing that requires time that oftentimes people don't want to give up, right? Mm-hmm. So they don't think about the overall process the reflection as being part of the overall process. It's kind of a nice to have. If we have time for it, we'll do that. And what ends up happening is people make the same mistakes over and over and over and over again because they're not taking the time to look back and go, all right, I committed to this, I executed that, what was in alignment, what was out of alignment. And if they don't do that, then they just keep making the same mistakes over again.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a like, as I look at this question of how do we, if we wanted an outcome to cultivate a hunger for God's word and learn to hear his spirit, I think one of the things that, like, that's very subjective. I don't know if our listeners are doing that. And what this reveals is, but we also haven't asked the question of our listeners. Hey, is this happening? I don't have because the nature of podcasts is very one way, like the information is pushed to people. We don't get a lot of information coming back. There isn't that sort of two-way street that's very well paved for us to be able to receive that information. So while I think we did the best we knew how to do to achieve that outcome, I have zero idea if we did. Like, I just don't have any data.
I don't know how to measure that either.
I don't, well, outside of people telling us.
Yeah.
So I think that's like, either it's an outcome we have to figure out how to get information back from, or we need to remove it.
Yeah.
So, okay. So what grade? You said 6.5? 7?
Yeah, for me.
6.5 for yourself. I'm going to give myself a 95%.
Oh my goodness.
Just kidding. I think, like, for me, I've enjoyed this because it's sort of, it's forced me to kind of look at some things again. A lot of sort of lessons and trainings and teachings and new insights, sermons that I've had in my past that I've been able to kind of dust off and reshape for this, which has been fun. So I think personally for me, I put this at like a solid 85% for myself. Okay. Last one. Last outcome we wanted was we wanted to have fun. How fun was this?
It was terrible. 5 out of 10. No, it was good. I mean, I had a ton of fun. I mean, it's fun getting to sit next to my dad.
Is it?
Oh, okay. It's fun when I've posted. It's not fun when I come in the room and I just like, let me just sit here and hope he doesn't notice me.
Right, like when
I've posted, it's fun.
It's fun when you do your job.
Well, okay. Isn't my presence just
It's so much fun?
So much fun, Dad.
I've had fun doing this. I think there's as the whole, I think if somebody were like, hey, you podcasting with your daughter, has that been a positive or negative experience? Like, oh man, it's so positive. It's been a really fun thing for us to do together. Now, is there work to it? Is there times when it's not fun? Is there times when it's like, I don't know how to say this, or I don't know how to shape this?
We don't know what we're going to do an episode on.
Yeah, there's those parts. There's some uncertainty or some obstacles that aren't, necessarily fun. But I think as the whole, I'd be like, yeah, this was a good time. I think we had fun. So I'd give it like a solid, what would you give it? If you're going to give yourself a grade in that area.
A 9.
Okay. 9 out of 10, 90%, an A?
Yeah.
An A minus or like a solid A?
A 92.
A 92. Okay. Yeah, I'd probably do the same.
Oh.
Yeah. Hey, high five. All right. Okay, so I should have been tracking our grade here, but I think overall we're probably at a solid B, like a solid maybe 84%.
Yeah, that's fair.
For this, which means there's room for us to grow. There's room for us to get better. There's always going to be room for us to get better. And I think there's room for us to be able to kind of dial in. Now that we've done this for a year, like, okay, what do we really want this to be about this next year? In light of that, we want to give out some thank yous to those of you that have listened to this podcast. If you have left a review for us, whether that's on Spotify or on Apple Podcast, thank you for doing that. That has been a massive, massive benefit to our podcast. It's one of those things that when people see that this thing is, being reviewed well, it really helps us. We got 28 reviews on our podcast, which is on Apple Podcasts, which is just fantastic.
I've not read them all.
And I don't know how many on Spotify off the top of my head. I can look that up.
Yeah. No, but also thank you for those who have subscribed.
Yes.
That's a huge blessing to us.
Yeah.
I mean, we wanted this to be successful, but we weren't necessarily doing it to have the most subscribers and be the most efficient podcast out there. And that's one of those things where you kind of, you want that, but it's like at the end of the day, it's like that's not why we're doing it.
Yeah. And I think, there's a part of it that I would pay attention to subscriber growth to be able to identify. I didn't want to see us losing subscribers, right? And over the course of the year, we only gained. We never lost any subscribers, which was fantastic. So if you've subscribed to the podcast, thank you for that, because it's helped us get some of that feedback from folks. It's a way of identifying that. If you've provided us feedback personally, whether that's been, I've gotten some Facebook messages, I've had some people email. There's been, the other day, Sue Geist, who's a good friend of ours, she emailed me. She said, "Hey, on your show notes, this is, incorrect. You might want to fix that." And I was like, man, I love that. And I was like, oh no, thank you very much. And I went in and I fixed it real quick and was able to get that resolved. So that kind of feedback is like really helpful because we want to produce something that we take pride in, but we also recognize that sometimes we don't know how stuff is being seen or what, maybe we did something too quickly and there was errors. Like there was one series of podcasts where I kept screwing up the album art numbering system. And Paul Vorvik gave me that feedback one time, which was really helpful. There's been times at church when we've had folks stop us at church and be like, "Oh, hey, I really liked this part of the podcast." And so that's been really, really helpful. So if you've provided us, whether that was written or in person or whatever the case may be, thank you for giving us that feedback. And then lastly, if you've told somebody about this, I was on when we posted this on Facebook, John Badeo tagged someone in the post and was like, so-and-so, this is the podcast I was talking about. Like that just was like, oh man, that's so great to see, because people share the things that inspire them, like we were talking about earlier. And so that's just so encouraging.
Absolutely.
To be able to see that.
What's been your favorite episode?
My favorite episode?
Yeah.
Do you have an answer to that question?
I'd have one of my favorites.
What's one of your favorites?
I like Generous Muffins.
Why did you like Generous Muffins? That was way at the beginning.
Yeah, there's two, and they're both kind of at the beginning. Generous Muffins. Oh, 3. The Fountain and Cistern. 2. 3, and How to Be a Good Guest. Those 3 are probably.
Why?
Those are just good ones.
I mean, what stood
like what
out
about
to you?
them?
Yeah.
Okay. First one, Generous Muffins. How do you steward generosity? We talked about as a military family, how do you do that every 2 years, to the people that are around you? Which is hard to do sometimes, especially if you're the new person and no one's done it yet, but you still want to meet people or just be a good neighbor. And how does God call us to love others?
Yeah.
And how do you generous with your resources, generous with your time, generosity to people that you might not want to be generous to is hard. But it's healthy.
I think for me, I'm going through our podcast here. I think it's some ones that were kind of burning within me that I wanted to do from the very beginning when we set out to do this. One was reasons why people don't go to church, and then how to find a church. Those are 2 different episodes. And so I'm glad we did those because I enjoyed kind of getting into that, because that's information I've been wanting to sort of sit down and map out. So that was episode 17 and 18. I think one of the podcasts that I thought was good, but the feedback we got from folks, in emails and in person, was the dating podcast. That was one that sort of surprised me as to how much people seem to like that one.
Yeah, no, that was a good one too. I feel like in 2025 we should do another dating.
Oh, you think
episode.
So? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, good. Well, any closing thoughts before we wrap up the year?
When I started, I was a senior in high school working part-time at Chick-fil-A. Now I'm an elite freshman at Regent University working at a different Chick-fil-A.
When I started, I was working out of Damnick, Virginia. Now I'm going to school in Durham, North Carolina. And this next year I'll be doing something different, and so will you. And
fun.
Lord knows, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be a good year. So we've got some great things in store coming next year. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, thank you for doing that. Leave us a reviews. We always welcome that. Mm-hmm. We wanted you to sign up for a newsletter. We're going to shoot out an email to our newsletter subscribers asking them for some feedback as we were talking. And so sign up for that today. And you can do that by visiting thisresilientsoul.com. You'll see a link to be able to sign up for that newsletter. And we're going to reach out to you. And we're going to ask you, some very targeted questions that we would love to get some feedback on as it'll shape some of the direction that we have for next year.
Yes.
So if you could do that for us, man, that'd just be a huge, huge blessing.
Anyway, have a great week, everyone. Enjoy 2025.
Happy New Year.